Okay, I'm not seeing any. So we will now have the fun time of Kim calling the roll call vote for us. Thank you, Kim.
I'll go quick. So County of San Diego, Leanne.
Yes.
City of San Diego, Kristen.
Yes.
City of Santee, Melanie.
Yes.
City of Carlsbad, Roseanne.
Yes.
City of Chula Vista, Cheryl.
Here.
City of Oceanside, Stephanie.
Yes.
Okay, Caltrans, David.
Yes.
CDFW, Dave.
Yes.
US Fish and Wildlife Service, Susan.
Yes.
USGS, Robert.
Yes.
Let's see, San Diego Conservation Network, Anne. I saw Anne on.
She's indicating yes.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Is Trish on? I don't see her. No.
I don't believe Trish is here.
Okay, and then Alliance for Habitat Conservation, Jim.
Here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That motion passes. So we will go ahead and move on to number 2 on the agenda, public and member comments. So I will ask members of the public who wish to offer public comment not related to matters on today's agenda to please raise your hand at this time so we can call on you. And I am not seeing any.
No, I am not either.
Okay, so now, are there any comments from members of the group? And actually, I'm going to go ahead and start because I have a little good news one. Back in the fall, the county was notified that one of our undercrossings under Valley Center Road, wildlife undercrossings, was being used by vehicles. And so we went out, and sure enough, someone had actually altered our brow ditch so that they could drive over top of it, and had added fill so they could create a little road to go from one side of the Valley Center Road to the other. And then actually gone through Daly Ranch as well on both sides to get to the there's an avocado orchard that is bisected by the road. And so we worked with the city of Escondido and got a letter out to them. The rancher was absolutely cooperative, went out there immediately and removed the structures that they had placed and removed the fill. And then they've done some remediation on the little rudimentary roads that they had created as well. So hopefully we're back to using that as wildlife undercrossing versus human undercrossing, but we'll keep monitoring it to see. But I just thought a good news story would be nice to start off. Does anybody else have any comments I'd like to share? I see Robert Fisher.
Yep. Can I share my screen for a sec? Let me just do that. I'm going to show a couple of just show a couple of slides real quick. It's another good news story, let's call it.
Great.
So we're doing work. You guys can see pictures of fish?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're doing the San Diego county-wide monitoring for arroyo toads. We're trying to do this statistical sampling. And so this is year 2 where we're trying the protocol still for doing the arroyo toads. So we were out at Sandia Creek 2 weeks ago. Sandia Creek, which is the former FPUD land, and now it's owned by Wildlands Conservancy, and it's a tributary to the Santa Margarita River, upstream of Camp Pendleton and upstream of the county park lands that are in Santa Margarita River. And we got this fish. And so this fish is a rainbow trout that we believe will become a steelhead next year if its genes turn on to go to the sea. And we've been working in Sandia Creek since the late 90s and have never seen a salmonid in that creek. And so this is one individual fish. We just caught it. My team caught it briefly in a dip net and then released it and photographed it. And we've shared this information with NMFS and National Marine Fisheries, who, and this is would be a steelhead are listed by NMFS as a southern steelhead are as an endangered species. But it's not considered a steelhead until it goes into a smolt phase and comes to the sea. So I'm just giving you a little bit of background because this is really important, because the work we've done as SANDAG to do invasive plant management in the Santa Margarita watershed, and the work that Pendleton has done for decades to remove arundo from the watershed, and then the work Camp Pendleton's done to remove non-native invasive aquatic species, seeming to pay off when we're getting these anadromous fish show back up in the system. And so this is in Sandia Creek from a couple weeks ago. This is, just to contrast it, this is a rainbow trout from middle of Pine Valley on Forest Service lands we've detected last year. And this would be considered a resident rainbow trout because it can't get to the sea because it's above Barrett Lake. And then this is now a smolting steelhead. This is a photo from Sherry Sullivan from Camp Pendleton. And they found this fish last month, several weeks before our fish, downstream about 16 kilometers from where we got that younger fish. And you can see it's missing its par marks, as they call them, on the side, and it's becoming this smolt phase. Now, this is considered a federally listed species as a southern steelhead as it's on its way to the sea. So anyway, I just wanted to contrast those things because we hope that next year, the fish that are in Sandia Creek now will become like this. And then in 2 to 4 years, they'll become like this. A steelhead in San Juan Creek in Orange County, trying to swim up. This was downstream of the Five. A friend of mine videotaped this in 2017. And so we're hoping that through the restoration programs we're doing and the cross management unit partnerships we're doing, we're going to be able to start recovering these species at like we'll see a disproportionate gain in recovery in some of these species. And so this is considered anadromous because it comes from the sea to lay eggs inland in the freshwater landscape, and then the young go back to the sea, and then they grow up, and then they come back as adults. And so the other anadromous fish we have is the lamprey, and this is a lamprey, a freshwater form of the lamprey from the Santa Ana River from 2017, below the 405 freeway on its way to the sea. This is the Santa Ana River. And this was found by Orange County Vector Control, and it has a sucking mouth part where it feeds in the mud, and it hasn't become an adult because it hasn't gotten to the sea to get the rasping mouth part yet. This is a lamprey. A friend of mine, Brian Zittuk, at Camp Pendleton on the upper end border, and this was the first actual physical record of a lamprey from the Santa Margarita River, and it's got the sucking mouth part, and this is from 2019, and then they were confirmed again in 2020. And then my team, when they got that rainbow trout, let's call it, 2 weeks ago, thinks they saw one of these. So we're going to go out next week to see if we can find any lamprey where we have the potential steelhead. And that would then be the first time in 100 years probably that both of those species were in the same watershed in San Diego County at the same time, which would be shocking. This is now an adult lamprey that I got in the Santa Ana River in 2017. And this is that raspy mouth part. These are the mouth parts to suck on a fish. And then these are some eggs. This was a dried one. And this was below the 22/5 freeway where the Santa Ana River hits it in Orange or Santa Ana. And anyway, I just wanted to share that because to me, that's another really important story that ties really well to the work we're doing for the last 20 years. The last thing I'll share real quick is this paper came out yesterday, and I'll drop this in the comment box, the PDF, if people, if I can, we'll see if I can, or I'll send a link to it. And this was another product that we've done in partnership with Sandag, and we've created a map, and Emily will work with us to make this on the Sdmmp website. And it's basically like the sunset guide to planting, but where risk of Argentina ants are at different degrees of badness in the county. So if you're a manager and you're in the North County, this model will kind of show you whether that's something you have to consider more in your management, Argentina ants or not. And like some places in the county, inland and in the south in particular, are much too dry for Argentina ants. And so you have less of an issue of Argentina ants in those landscapes. And so we just published this paper, and then this will be available. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'll drop the URL for, Nature Conservancy just put out a video, like a 4-minute video on the red-legged frog reintroduction project, which also ties back to Sandag and our removal of invasives and restoration on this one ranch in partnership with lots of people in San Diego County. So I'll drop that little fun video in the comments. Thanks for letting me share all that stuff.
Robert, if you just can also send it over to us, we can get it out to the working group and interested parties after the meeting. So.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. We love to hear the good news stories. Does anybody else have comments? I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I have some, but I was going to let the working group members go first, but.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands. So go ahead, Kim. What have you got?
So I just have a few, but I'll start out with kind of the housekeeping items first. So just to let you guys know, we've been trying to, these meetings are quarterly now, and we've been trying to send out to the working group members it as an invite, just so we could see, it's easier for you guys to reply with an accept or a deny, because we've been told now with the Brown Act, apparently maybe we're doing it wrong all those years, but if we have items that are, even if we just have information only items, if we don't have a quorum, we'll have to cancel the meeting. So thank you guys all for, replying and getting over here to the working group meeting at 1. So
wait a minute, Kim. You don't need a quorum to hear something. What are they saying to you?
That's what I've been told.
I get it every Thursday, and you can have the meeting, you just can't vote.
That's what we thought. That's not what I've been told. So
who told you this?
Our legal.
Huh.
Oh.
Huh.
Second thing is, as you can see, Leanne is still hosting our meetings. Thank you, Leanne. We had hoped to have the appointment of our new chair by this meeting, but things have kind of been slow over here and with our management. They're aware of this, but they've been really focusing on the regional plan. So I'm hoping to have more information on a chair by September. And then we have a revised date for our joint working group meeting that we're going to be holding on the draft 2021 regional plan. I think you guys received emails saying to hold the date for Wednesday, June 16th. They're finalizing the agenda and the information that should be going out sometime this week. So we just ask that you hold that new date. And then finally, the South Bay to Sorrento Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, or CMCP, is asking for all of our working groups feedback. To learn more, you visit sandag.org/CMCP, and there's you navigate to the South Bay to Sorrento project page, and there's a virtual engagement hub. There's a direct link that's provided there. And you can provide input if you're interested on the corridor plan project list. There's story maps, and you can sign up for office hours to meet with a project team member if you're interested. This corridor plans phase 2 engagement period ends July 12th. So I will also, after this meeting, be sending out more information on the links for easier access. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So do we have any further comments? One last chance. I'm not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is request for formation of an ad hoc committee for fiscal year 2022 annual funding.
Okay, it's again that time of year. It seems like we were just doing this last year. So every year we form an ad hoc committee to develop recommendations for our annual allocation of our regional management and monitoring funding. So this would be funding for fiscal year 2022, aligning with the work plan that was approved last year for 2021, 2022. So I hope to have the committee meeting sometime late July, August, and then we'll be back before the working group in September with our recommendations. So can I ask for 6 to 7 volunteers? Raise your
Go ahead and
hand.
raise.
Okay.
See Robert Fisher, Jim, Leanne,
Susan.
Usual suspects.
Susan, David, Mayor, Trish Smith, Stephanie, yeah.
Anyone else? 1,
I
2.
think that's it. Is that enough? We have more than 6, right?
That's perfect. That is perfect.
Okay. We don't
Thank
have a quorum though, right?
Hmm?
Not a quorum. Okay. Let's see. Do we need to vote on that? We don't need to vote on that, right, Kim?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, very good. So moving on. Item number 5. Sarah McCutcheon from Sdmmp and Courtney from Sandag will present the final regional habitat conservation vision and how this vision ties into the 2021 regional plan. Courtney and Sarah, go ahead, take the screen.
Had to find the unmute button. Good afternoon, EMP Working Group. My name is Courtney, as Leanne just introduced me, and Sarah McCutcheon and I are here to present the Regional Habitat Conservation Vision included in the draft 2021 Regional Plan. Last fall, we were tasked with taking the draft Habitat Conservation Vision and incorporating it into the regional plan as a white paper and ultimately as an appendix. The vision is based on previous input from the EMP Working Group, ad hoc committee meetings, and existing data. In addition, we will be providing an update on what our next steps are for the Habitat Conservation Vision. Many of you already know the history of habitat conservation in San Diego County, so we won't spend too much time going through the timeline, but we wanted to briefly remind you of some important dates. In 1991, the Natural Community Conservation Planning Act, also known as NCCP, was passed. In 1993, the coastal California gnatcatcher was listed as a federally listed species by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In 1997, the City of San Diego's Management Strategic Comprehensive Plan Implementing Agreement, also known as MSCP, was signed. Then in 1998, the County of San Diego's MSCP Implementing Agreement was signed. In 2004, voters approved the Transit Extension Ordinance with funding allocated to environmental mitigation and regional management and monitoring projects. In 2008, the Memorandum of Agreement to implement the EMP program was established by the EMP Working Group. $4 million is to be allocated each year for 10 years for regional management and monitoring projects. And finally, in 2018, the tax measure A failed to receive 2/3 vote that was needed to have passed. When envisioning a future for habitat conservation in San Diego County, the EMP Ad Hoc Committee needed to establish what the challenges for habitat conservation are. Through collaboration, the Ad Hoc Committee created a challenge statement to better illustrate the importance of implementing future habitat conservation plans throughout San Diego County. That statement reads, San Diego is a biodiversity hotspot and contains plants and animals that can be found nowhere else in the world. Loss and degradation of habitat, invasive species, and changes in climate are driving many species to the edge of extinction at an increasing rate. To address the identified challenge statement, the EMP Ad Hoc Committee developed vision goals to further conservation efforts in the region. Outlined in the 2021 draft regional plan, under habitat conservation goals, Our resolve is to protect existing native species through strategic acquisition, management, and monitoring of critical habitat areas identified in regional habitat conservation plans. Connect habitat areas through wildlife corridors and linkages, as well as connecting people to local species and native habitats. And finally, respect. Respect native species and habitat. Balance the demands for recreation opportunities with the desire for intact natural landscapes. Encourage community respect for natural lands through increased public outreach and education of San Diego's unique biodiversity. I will now turn it over to Sarah, who will discuss these 3 vision goals in more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. So the first vision goal is to protect. And by protect, we mean protect species and their habitats to prevent extinction in San Diego County, as well as protecting existing habitats. One way to protect existing habitats and species is by acquiring land. In 1995, over 359,000 acres were conserved. That's increased to over 1.3 million acres today, or about 59% of the county. While that is a very promising step, additional key lands need to be conserved to continue the habitat conservation efforts in San Diego County. So this case study highlighted on this slide is for Sandag's single largest acquisition under the EMP, known as Hidden Valley. In 2012, Sandag partnered with the U.S. Department of the Interior with assistance from the Nature Conservancy to acquire over 1,900 acres of land in Jamul. This expanded and connected the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge to California's Rancho Jamul Ecological Reserve. Regional funding was used to leverage federal and state funding to fulfill the vision of protected and connected system of natural lands. This property is now managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The next vision goal is to connect. And so connect has a dual purpose, connecting the habitat corridors and wildlife linkages, as well as creating connections between people and landscapes. These are invaluable for fostering an appreciation for nature and for the support of local conservation efforts. So outlined in the 2021 regional plan, Sandag will implement a nature-based climate solutions program to promote natural infrastructure that uses or mimics natural processes to benefit and connect people and wildlife, utilizing space efficiently and effectively for transportation. To continue, the EMP will need to acquire more land to connect priority linkages for species like mountain lions and the coastal cactus wren. By providing species with alternative linkage routes through land acquisition, species can safely move through corridors without human interference. So the Transnet EMP funded projects for conservation of coastal cactus wrens rely on both aspects of connection and are discussed in the case study located on this slide. In 2003 and 2007, the wildfires and subsequent drought in San Diego County are thought to have caused the decline of the region's coastal cactus wren by as much as 80%. USGS researchers, funded in part by the EMP, collaborated across the 5 Southern California counties to evaluate the connectivity of coastal cactus wren populations. Field observation and genetic testing identified barriers to movement and locations where habitat restoration can improve genetic connectivity to keep the species thriving in its natural environment. Putting research into action, students from High Tech High and elementary schools near Choyas Creek have assisted in cactus planting. By allowing the students to become involved in habitat restoration to improve habitat connectivity for coastal cactus wren, we are also accomplishing connecting people to landscapes, furthering one's appreciation or respect for nature. And then that leads us to our last vision goal, which is respect. Respect is gained through education, awareness, and by spending more time in nature. This enhances one's respect for the natural environment and in turn provides benefits to their lives. With a better understanding of the natural communities and the areas surrounding them, people recognize the importance of conserving local lands and have a greater appreciation of the natural surroundings. So one great way to increase this understanding is through youth outreach. This fosters a respect for nature early on and provides future generations of stewards for our preserves. These open areas allow us to connect with nature for overall mental and physical well-being, improving quality of life for current and future generations. So this case study on this slide highlights the Earth Discovery Institute, which is where this picture came from. They are an environmental nonprofit that focuses on involving communities and students in San Diego County conservation efforts. EDI was funded through the EMP Land Management Grant Program to expand resources resource agencies' efforts in providing community outreach and environmental service learning for students. EDI was able to facilitate educational events for more than 4,000 students at local schools. In addition, EDI was able to hold 75 interpretive community volunteer events, and at these events, more than 3,000 volunteer hours were recorded. So next slide, thanks. When developing the regional habitat conservation vision, several barriers were identified, including a lack of ongoing secure regional funding, a lack of institutional knowledge and public awareness, and a waning political focus on habitat conservation. So a steady, secure regional funding source is needed to complete the land acquisitions as proposed and to provide for ongoing land management. Acquisition of land has primarily been through state and federal funding, leveraging offsets from land development. Similar funds are diminishing as more areas in California and the nation follow San Diego in adopting these habitat conservation plans. This will place an increasing pressure on the region to complete the acquisition and management of natural lands without a dedicated funding source. Another barrier is the lack of institutional knowledge and public awareness, as the leadership and institutional structures that helped create the habitat conservation plans retire or shift to more current issues. The knowledge and purpose of these plans has eroded. A recent study, which I think we actually saw a presentation by this a few months ago, maybe a couple of years ago now. A recent study by the University of San Diego Castor Center identified San Diegans' knowledge about the problems facing native plants and animals, and that was identified as low, while the proportion of respondents identifying and sharing environmental values was high once informed about the issues. So this lack of public awareness is a barrier to our success. Similarly, the focus on habitat conservation as a major public policy issue has waned since the 1990s. Over the years, environmental policy focus has shifted more towards stormwater and climate adaptation, even though habitat conservation aids in both in resolving both of these issues. In some respects, regional habitat conservation is a victim of its own success, being perceived as an issue that has been resolved by the region without an understanding of the current gaps. A public policy champion is needed to bring focus back on this issue. And lastly, while major accomplishments have been made in the last 25 years, the challenge to protect and manage a system of interconnected natural lands still has not been accomplished. SANDAG, through its innovative EMP, has provided a successful stopgap measure to partially fill the regional funding needs over the last 15 years. However, the larger acquisitions under the EMP have been accomplished, and the EMP does not have the capacity to assist the region with all the necessary funding for future management. The region must look towards the future if it wishes to complete the promise of regional habitat conservation.
So while several barriers have been identified in implementing the vision for regional habitat conservation, the role of SANDAG as the regional planning agency and its commitment in its development of a sustainable community strategy will provide new opportunities to fulfill the promises made during the adoption of various regional habitat conservation plans. As mentioned in our previous slide, SANDAG will establish a nature-based climate solutions program that will promote natural infrastructure that uses or mimics natural processes. SANDAG will prioritize resilience, innovative solutions in transportation infrastructure, comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, and consistent regional planning and implementation of sustainable community strategy actions, emphasizing nature-based and technological climate solutions. In addition, proactive efforts through the EMP program, such as the advanced mitigation and early acquisition of land, along with regional collaboration of land management and monitoring with Sdmmp, has proven to show that together we can leverage our funding and collective knowledge to benefit the region. As part of the 2021 draft regional plan, SANDAG is charting a new vision for future mobility. SANDAG envisions regional mobility hubs connected by high frequency transit, which will provide greater mobility options throughout the region. Similarly, the regional habitat conservation efforts has envisioned hubs of protected natural lands connected by wildlife movement corridors that will hopefully allow the system to adapt the 2021 regional plan, changing ecological conditions associated with climate change, and to be resilient to wildfires and emerging invasive species. There are also further opportunities to expand upon ongoing efforts to assess the amount of carbon storage and sequestration, potential of open space lands and co-benefits of preserved open space, land management, and restoration activities. Draft 2021 regional plan can be accessible at sd4.com. After the EMP working group today, a link to the draft plan will be included in the PowerPoint presentation that will be uploaded to the SANDAG website. And our particular appendix is Appendix AA, Regional Habitat Conservation Vision. I will now turn it over to Allison Wood that will discuss the 2021 draft regional plans, programs, and policies.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. So in addition to the appendix that Courtney and Sarah mentioned with the habitat conservation vision, I wanted to point out a few other areas of the plan where you can specifically see where policies and investment related to implementing that vision can be found. So we have, in addition to the transportation network and projects of the RTP, we have several policy and program areas that you can see on the screen here. And specifically wanted to point out the land use and regional growth policy area and the climate adaptation and resilience policy area. So these are two policy areas that put forth a pattern of growth and development in the region that is focused in the urbanized areas, in those mobility hub areas that Courtney mentioned. And then the nature-based climate solutions program is described in the climate adaptation and resilience area of the plan. So there's a lot of information in Appendix B, which is our implementation actions. So I think that's another key appendix that this group might want to look at to really see what we've proposed around these policy areas. And we're eager to get your input on those as well. You can go to the next slide, Courtney. So I had just a little bit more information here on the nature-based climate solutions program. And what we've included in the plan is fairly high level, and that's intentional so that we can continue to work with groups like this one to really develop what this program would be. But we're proposing a program that expands upon EMP to continue a lot of the activities that have been done to date, and tying in some of those other benefits that Sarah brought up. So tying in regional stormwater needs and as well carbon sequestration benefits. So the proposed dollar amount sort of allocated to this program in the plan is about $500 million. Understand, you know, that won't fulfill all of the needs of the region out to 2050, but at least gives us a starting point and something to work with. So that's another area of the plan that's included that, you know, we'd appreciate your feedback on as well.
Thank you, Allison. So just what are our next steps? As Kim mentioned before, on June 16th, there will be a joint working group meeting to discuss the draft 2021 regional plan. A Zoom meeting invite was sent on June 1st. Throughout the month of June through the end of July, the draft regional plan will be out for public review. Later this summer, the draft EIR will be released for public review. And finally, this December, the 2021 regional plan will be adopted and the EIR will be certified. That concludes our presentation, and Sarah, Allison, and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the overview. Does anybody have any questions? Jim?
What's the grand total of all the money that could be coming for regional habitat conservation purposes, if successful? The billions, hundreds of millions? Anybody know?
So, you know, we have the nature-based climate solutions program, the part that's, I'd have to go back and get an answer for you in terms of environmental mitigation associated with transportation projects. That's all grouped into the cost of those capital projects. So we haven't pulled that piece out separately. So let me take that back and see if I can get some more information for you, unless Keith has any additional information.
Can you split it between acquisition and management? Because really that's the issue has always been regional funding. It's never changed.
I can address that, Jim.
Thanks,
So
Keith.
I think the upshot here is the regional plan looks at transportation and has now added on habitat conservation vision as part of the SCS. That's a sustainable community strategy. And this is the vision that we laid out before you. We've talked about it before, and what's included in here is what we've previously as a working group have come up with. The plan itself right now has both mitigation done in the capital projects, which is the typical acquisition, compensatory mitigation that we've talked about in years. But it also has its nature-based solutions, which Allison just came over with. And that's about $500 million. Now, both those two things are not going to equal the regional funding source. They are never intended to. And I think that's the opportunity as a working group and as your own individuals, entities working with your own agencies and nonprofits to talk about what does that look like in the future. We know that this regional plan will require a vote of the people for a funding source. So independent of anything occurring in the habitat world, the regional plan will require a vote of the people to implement. That represents an opportunity. We've teed up that opportunity here by having a vision of what habitat conservation could look like in the future. And now as we move along towards adoption of the plan in December, and then ultimately funding the plan, which will come on potentially in 22 or 24 as part of our regional vote, that represents an opportunity for the working group and larger for the stakeholders in the region to come together and suggest how we can move habitat conservation vision from a vision to reality. So there's no number right now, Jim. I think that's all going to be happening after we adopt a plan.
Okay, because I think we've done great for not having a regional funding source, but that day is upon us, perhaps.
Concur. Now, if we have 2/3 of the voters concur, then we're in good shape.
Any other questions or comments for Courtney, Sarah, Allison?
I think this is awesome. I'm so glad we're doing it and moving it forward, because you can see in some of these other plans where we're not doing the basics like of commitments that were made in the 90s to do monitoring of whiptails or whatever. Like we're not even checking any boxes of success. And here we're like way ahead of the curve and visioning forward for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think that to me has been always the concern is we can do regional planning, but if they just become regional park network for urban, for people to go outside, that doesn't meet these goals. And so I think really articulating these goals and the potential of these landscapes, and then that feedback loop of success, showing what we're getting to, what success means. I think that's the critically important part. And to me, having steelhead back is success. Like that's an impossible success that nobody would have envisioned out, 30 years ago. So I think those are the kinds of things that we want to bring into this so we can see what that potential is through this process. Yeah, no, this is great.
Thanks, Robert. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands.
Me neither.
Do you see any on the attendees side as well, the public?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you, ladies, Courtney, Sarah, Allison, for giving us that overview. You said you wanted feedback. Is that in the participating in the joint planning session on the 16th, and any sort of public opportunities like on the EIR, that type of stuff? Is that what you're thinking, or are you thinking? Okay.
Yeah, so the joint working group meeting is a great opportunity for that. And I think the real, benefit there is that we're bringing, subject matter experts from a lot of different disciplines together for that meeting. And so it's a great opportunity to really show how these systems all interact and how the decisions we make in one part of the plan really impact or have benefits in other parts of the plan as well. So that's one opportunity. And then we're also hosting a number of public open houses throughout June. So I can get that information to Kim and Courtney as well. And, please help spread the word to your constituents as well to get them to participate.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 6. Dr. Chris Preston will provide an overview and timeline for completing the State of the Preserve report, with a discussion with working group members to gather comments and questions on finalizing the report. And then Emily Perkins will end the presentation with a demonstration of the SDMMP's web portal dashboard being developed for the State of Preserve metrics. That'll be good. Okay, so go ahead, take it away, Chris.
Thank you. Can you please show the first slide? Okay, today, I'm just really excited to see the previous discussion, and I think that this actually ties into all of that very well. I think that looking at the State of the Preserve report, what I came away with is that we've done a lot of things really well, like conservation and monitoring, but that there's a lot of need out there because threats have increased in the last 20 years that weren't really anticipated when these plans were started in terms of just the magnitude of threats such as fire, invasive species, and changing climate. So today what I wanted to do is, first of all, thank the SDMMP team for all the hard work that they did. This was truly a joint effort and everybody took ownership of sections of this plan or this report. And so I just wanted to thank Sarah, Emily, Chris, and Annabelle for all their hard work, and of course, Kim, and then all of our partners that participated. I've already got comments back from Keith and Susan, and they're going to be very helpful. And so what I'd like to do today next is just talk a little bit about where we are with this plan, but really open it up to some discussion of if any of you have reviewed it, of some of your thoughts. The comments are not due until next Monday. We wanted to give you plenty of time. So, going through this a little bit, it may jog some comments out of you too with this discussion. So this is what the report will look like. It will be an actual open file report, the USGS report, and it will have a lot of peer review as a result. Next. So today I'm just going to talk real quickly about our timeline for completing the report. I have some ideas about how we might want to reorganize the report that I wanted to get feedback on. So I think I'll talk a little bit, very brief, not much of a presentation, and then I'll open it up for discussion. And then Emily's going to give you a live demonstration of our dashboard, and then we'll open it up again for more discussion and in the remainder of our time. Next. So the timeline right now is, as we see it, and we're going to be meeting with Kim tomorrow to finalize this, but June and July, we will be revising the draft report that was submitted to the EMP working group for review. We have not sent it out for larger review, partly because of some USGS review policies, but we will be letting folks have a look at it and being able to comment. August to December, we will then be going through that peer review process, external peer review and through USGS. And also it takes a while to get everything through the editorial production process. So I really anticipate that the final report will be available to post and distribute to partners, public, and so on in January. And that's just because there are limitations that we have to work with in terms of USGS reporting. And at that time, we will also roll out our metrics dashboard. And Emily will have a better feel and let you know a little bit more about it. It won't be completely done, but it will have the major portions of our State of the Preserve report, the metrics on there. And then she's developing more tools. Our team's developing more tools that will be added as we complete them. Next. So we really hustled to get this report. It's been a long time coming, but it's a huge amount of effort. And when we got done with our sections and put them all together, we realized, wow, this is a really long report. Now we are following the Mount Tam report format. And I went and looked, and theirs is about 358 pages. So theirs is longer than ours. Ours is 275 pages, which is a lot. That's more than I think any of our partners are going to want to sit down and review. So I have some ideas how we might shorten that, maybe come up with a synthesis of the main results as the body of the report and a summary page for each of our indicators, which compiles the overall metric condition as well as the individual metrics, and gives some key points about putting into context and then interpreting what this means. And then we could link each indicator to a more detailed section that's what we have really in the body of our report now, which has all the details that people might want to see. And then even from that, especially through the dashboard, they could even then get to data, to reports and everything that goes into making those metrics. Next. So this is sort of what I was thinking, and this is what I'd really like to get some ideas on. This has a little bit, maybe too much text on it for me, so we might reduce it down even more. But you can see this is an example of the San Diego thorn mint, which is one of our rare and specialist species representing clay soil narrow endemic, found in a very restricted area. And so it talks a little bit about the natural history, the ecology, the conservation status, just really condenses down what we have in much more detail in the actual metrics section or indicator section. It gives our desired conditions, which these come from our actual management and monitoring strategic plan goals. So these are actually in our document as what we would like to see in the future. And then it gives the metrics. It gives the overall status, which is based on compiling the individual metrics. And then it talks about each of the individual metrics, just telling the condition, the trend, and our confidence in those metrics. And again, this follows from the Mount Tam example. And so I'd like to get your input on that. And then finally, it's a short paragraph that just sort of summarizes how we think this species is doing, or this indicator is doing, what just summarizes what's in those metrics. And then it has a link to the longer section. Next. And this is what would be in the appendix. This is the current section for San Diego thorn mint. And I think that's just a little bit much for people to wade through, but it should be in the report so that people can get to it if they have questions and really want to see the information. And again, when this all goes live on our dashboard, it will be very easy to navigate around and go to this information, or even go to the reports and underlying data. Next. And so I thought I'd pause here, and then I'm going to introduce the MSC portal and Emily. But first, are there any questions or suggestions? What do you have any input you want to provide on what I've just talked about, shortening or just in general? Well, I don't see any hands up.
It's hard to see in this format.
Because it looks good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the summary with the stuff in the back is fine if you're concerned. I'm not sure that the length of the report should be that big of a concern, because most people will go to the portal and view the dashboard, which would have that summary in the dashboard. Mm-hmm. And then in the end, right, this report will be the supporting documentation to the dashboard, which would provide that summary function.
Is anybody else concerned about the length?
No, it's shorter than the MSP, so that's fine. It's like 30% of that length.
So Chris, I'll weigh in, being a longtime watcher of this whole program. So I think the report, Susan's right, will connect in the dashboard. I don't think there's any issues about that once the dashboard's up. But I do think you should have some kind of synthesis, overall infographic. And I would suggest you look at the San Diego Regional Plan, 21 Regional Plan, which we just talked about. They've done a nice job of taking a lot of complex information, which is like spread out over like 30 appendices, and putting it into a really simple user graphical interface. And I think it was an elegant job and nicely done. So I would suggest you use that to look at the report itself, and then keep all that detail in the background.
Okay, that sounds great. You can easily do that.
That seems to always be the hardest task, is to simplify down so that other people can utilize the information, and then just you know, having the links for the folks that really want to delve in.
Yeah.
Looks good though.
So I thought what I would get comments on was we're not doing as well as we would like, but I think we can explain all that. And I think we can also explain how our trajectory is going. One point I would want to make is that we had to drop some species just because we ran out of time. And some of those may have been our more successful species, you know, as indicators and so on. We do anticipate in the future adding in more indicators as well as more metrics. So we were limited at this point by data availability on some of our metrics, as well as the time. So I would, and I think going into this web portal-based dashboard, it will be really easy to do that. And we can update things, you know, as we get new information in too. And then our idea was to come up with a state of the preserve report every 5 years after we've completed our planning cycle. So this report reflects the 2017 through 21 planning cycle, actually 2020, but close. And then the next would come out at the end of the 2026 planning cycle, 2022 to 2026. So is there any other comments on, you know, what this all means or concerns or anything?
Anyone else?
Okay, Emily. Well, first, let me just introduce the MSP portal metrics dashboard. What's really cool about what Emily's put together is we can view metrics at multiple scales and levels of detail. And so I think that that makes it very effective. There's going to be interactive map viewers and tools. It has the MSC goals and objectives, and then you can go in and you can go actually to the pages that back all of this up, you know, whether it be the species pages, vegetation and threats, or landscape scale pages, as well as going down to individual projects, downloading reports, and so on. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Emily.
So, okay. Web page. Yes. So this is Sdmmp.
Emily,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Is there a way you can change the microphone input? It sounds a little fragmented.
Sounds really cool though.
Make sure everybody else is on mute too.
This did it last time, and
You're talking through a kazoo.
It sounds
okay,
better
so
now.
does this sound better? You have to do a thumbs up because I can't hear you when I'm on this setting. Okay, so you have to wave at me if you need something, or I'm just gonna plow right ahead. Okay, so this is our Sdmmp homepage, sdmmp.com. And I just wanted to show quickly sort of how the metrics would fit into our existing system. Right now we have our MSP portal. And so it would take just a little bit of reorganization of this dropdown, and I think a little bit of organization from our portal page, maybe put the searches together and add another box for metrics. So it will be on its own page where you can get to it and you can sort of get everything at once, kind of like a landing page. You can jump up and down the page and search for things. But you can also get it through our existing pages. So right now our topic search specifically for the MSP has species, veg, and threats, and that lines up one-to-one with our indicator categories for metrics. So I'm going to show a quick example today of oak woodlands. So we can see all of our vegetation communities, and each species, each vegetation community, and each threat has a page that looks like this, where you sort of get all the information that you need in one spot. We have profile information, a map, we have the MSP background information, we have a link to tracker and the goals and objectives, and this goes straight to oak woodlands, where you can see our objectives, which will be updated as they get updated in this latest round. Here you can look at actions, and you can go actually to a project which has data. This will have data as soon as it gets through the review at Usgs. And so you can see sort of everything. You can get really down into details from here. And so probably in this top section, maybe in here will be another link for metrics. And that will take you to this. So this I've shown a little bit before, but I've updated it based on how our report format finished. And with the new information, it'll be updated with all of the comments. Right now, all of the text and sections is in a database. And so once we get the comments back into our database, it's a pretty simple way to just output either a PDF report or output it onto our website. And so we'll have sort of internal tools for SDMMP to go in and make changes to the text and to the metric values, and then it will be able to show on our website. And that is how our MSP goals and objectives are right now. We have an internal page for SDMMP to go in and update those, and then it shows up on the website. So those are kind of behind the scenes, but it just helps us make sure that if information is repeated multiple times throughout the website, it all gets updated at once when we just make one change in the database, and it just sort of helps SDMMP get things done faster. So this is what it would look like. We have why this is included. This can also have active links to all of our sources. So this one is for the Msp Roadmap, Volume 2B. And here is our SDMMP library. Takes you right to the Msp Volume 2B, where you can download this as a PDF. So we're working right now on making sure every single source in this document is in our library, and we know the link, the URL to it here, so that we can put these in automatically as well. But you'll see those throughout. Then we have the information like the condition, overall condition and desired condition. We have links back to that original summary page. So if you came to this through sort of the portal side, you might want to go back to the Oak Woodland side, or you could come in through the Oak Woodland side and get back to the goals and objectives. So it's sort of designed to help you find all information no matter how you come into the page. And then a direct link again to that, the goals and objectives, that's that same link there. So then we have the threats information for this section. And again, each one of these has its own page. So you can look at the MSP background information, the goals and objectives for this threat, and then you can link directly to projects which have data and reports, or you can look at reports that we've flagged or tagged for having addressed climate change in this case. So you can really go down a lot of rabbit holes by looking at all these different things through links. As far as the metric information, then we'd have an overview of the condition, trend, and confidence. So the Oak Woodlands has condition, trend, and confidence at the higher level for the entire indicator, and then it has it for each metric. In this case, we included 2 metrics in this report, and we have 2 planned for the future. These don't show, maybe we talked about whether or not we want these ones to show at this point or not, but I added in sort of where we are in the process and why they're showing at this moment. So we have good, unknown, and moderate. The 2 that we look at are the % of conserved habitat and the ecological integrity. And so then you can dig down more into each metric individually. So the first one, % of Oak Woodlands conserved. This is all that same report information, again, with links to all of these sources. You can get just quickly the condition, trend, and confidence. So this is for the first metric then. These thresholds, anything in particular with conservation, these are draft numbers while we wait for the North and East County plans. So these numbers in particular will probably change, but we put it into the caution category because it didn't meet our 50% Oak Woodlands. I think likely that number will get even higher. And then you can have an interactive map here. So this shows you a pie chart that's giving you the trend information. This is how much we had conserved 25% of oak woodlands were conserved in 1995. We've added another of the 9% to get it up to that 34%. And this can, this is an interactive map. You can move around and zoom in and out. The next map has even cooler stuff. So this is just conserved and unconserved. And then we have the second metric, which is ecological integrity. In this case, we defined ecological integrity as the percent of dead trees within a 30-meter grid. Total overall, 85% of the area was considered high integrity or healthy. And so that made our cutoff to get into the good category of 80%. And so you can see again, this overview quickly of good. We don't have information on the trend at this point. This is based on LiDAR data that was taken in 2014 and 2015. And then the NDVI data was taken from 2014 NAPE imagery. And what we will do in the future is look at how the NAPE imagery NDVI changed over time. So we can look at, it's now every 2 years an image is taken for NAPE, and it's now at half a meter resolution. So we get finer and finer resolution through time, and we can get this trend as we get that data organized. In this case, the data is available for download through a project. So we can actually just link directly to that project. So you can download the data, or you can look at it here in another interactive map. This one, these graphs are live graphs. So if you click on high, the map's going to redraw to show you just high integrity areas. You can look at moderate and low. Maybe there it is. This graph will also update as you zoom in and out of the graph. So if you wanted to look at a specific area, turn everything back on. The 85% overall might not be indicative of a particular area because some of these problems are so localized. So you might want to zoom into a specific area. And I was going to zoom in over here, where we have a little bit lower integrity sites and some oak die-off. And you can see this graph is changing as we zoom and move around. So you can get sort of individual, you can look at it at different layers where the metric is looking at it from an entire MSPA area. You can also zoom in and get it at lower areas as well. You can also change this to imagery, and you could try turning this sort of on and off to try to get an idea of what's happening in some of these spaces. This area was burned in both 2003 and 2007. And the imagery is 2020. And so it might not show that as well. I'm going to work on getting that NAPE imagery in as well. And that is it for oak. We just have the two that weren't included in this one. So if anyone has any comments on what specific information you'd want to see on the website, or if there's something else, I'm going to switch my microphone so that I can hear you, but then I'm going to sound weird. So I'll just go back and forth. Okay.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on that? On the website?
It's amazing. As usual, it's amazing. I don't know how you do that. I can't even explain how you do it to people.
Yeah, that's pretty slick that that scales, as you zoom in, your graphs update. That's pretty slick.
Well, and even how when you say you can go down all these rabbit holes, you left the links in there so that you can get back. That's so lacking in so many websites. You have to find your way back.
Yeah, try to make it all connected.
I wanted to mention right here that this percent dead trees is for both riparian, like willow riparian, and for oak woodland. And so we're going to be using this to do time series to look at golden spotted oak borer in the oak woodlands and to look at shot hole borer in the riparian woodlands. So we think this will be a really valuable tool. This area that Emily's showing here, east of the San Diego River Gorge, like near William High County Park in that area had huge shot hole, I mean, golden spotted oak borer mortality. So, you know, we can see it pick.
Any other comments or questions?
No, I think it's come out really good. It's clear. It's easy to follow. Like it makes a lot of sense. I think it'll be really interesting to start crosswalking some other data, you know, as we start really get that spatial overlay. I think, no, I think this is going to be really, the story is really going to start unfolding in a much larger, like exponential way of what's going on down here now that we've got a lot of these building blocks all kind of sorted out. And Leanne, I don't know, I love that little shop you're in with the little dog behind you.
That is not a little dog. My husband is 6'5", right there. That's at the Broad. It's a Coon's balloon animal.
It's funny.
So there's a raised hand for the San Diego Audubon Society.
We have to allow that. Oh,
Hello, can you hear me?
yep.
Yes.
Hi, sorry. This is Andrew from the San Diego Audubon Society, and sorry for barging in, but I raised my hand, and thanks for calling on me. This is amazing. It's super, super cool. I wanted to follow up on Robert Fisher's comment. I'm just curious. I don't know this interface well, Emily, but can you toggle on and off conserved lands or parcel boundaries or those kinds of things? What else can you, thinking about the kinds of questions that you would use to query where this information is and what you would know about ecological integrity versus health versus protection status and land use and those kinds of things. So if you could just say a little bit more about what else you can turn on and off here besides your focus information, that would be useful. Thanks.
Okay, switched my speaker again, so I can't hear you. But yes, so these are online maps that I made, and we have sort of a really large, let me show you, under resources, GIS map viewer. And this is sort of where we kind of put everything that we have. And it gets kind of chaotic. So we have sort of separate ones to target certain things. But anything that we have here for sure can be added to any online map that we have. And we can also add even more than that. And anything that we have, we can add and share. And so, yeah, if you have specific things that you want to look at, but yeah, we'll update those individual maps to have stuff like at least conserved lands, maybe fire. We have the gold spotted oak borer map where positive detections were found. We could add that on as well. If you have any specific suggestions, I'm happy to add more things on, but yeah, we can expand it a lot.
What a great tool. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? This is really, really great.
So if anybody has comments or on the report, please, you know, either contact me or put comments on the version that we send out, and we'll be compiling all the comments once we receive them on the 14th and starting the revision process. So please reach out if you want to talk to me about anything. Thank you for those of you that have already submitted your reviews.
Well, thank you, Chris and Emily, for highlighting those, and please provide feedback as you start using those really great tools, and anything you can that will help shape this in the future. Thanks. Okay, our final item today will be a presentation by Jonathan Richmond of USGS on the development of an invasive animal strategic plan for conserved lands in San Diego County. So go ahead, Jonathan.
And I'll share my screen and toggle for Jonathan or John.
Okay. John.
Man, that doesn't look good for that frog.
You guys can see the first slide, right?
Big time.
Okay, John, we
Yeah.
don't hear you yet.
We need to unmute John.
Is that a small child that frog is eating?
I think so.
Man,
John, we can't hear you still. No. Oh, he's calling me. Hang on.
He messaged us he's having difficulties.
Hey.
Just totally.
Maybe we should release this dog here. Hunt the toads.
is that a life-size Jeff Koons, Leanne?
Yeah. Yes.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's at the Broad in LA.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what-
Oh, well, you missed
that's
something
why
in
I
your
was
house.
confused. Yeah.
I thought Leanne had it in her house. Like she's been hiding some money.
So John, as it stands, the way the government works is they always restart your computer and force an upgrade right when you need it. So he called to say that his computer was almost done restarting. It just triggered a restart right before he was going on. So he'll be back on in a sec, and then he'll jump on and take the project forward. So sorry about that. And he was having problems getting the share screen to work because he had to use the web interface on his computer. So that's why I'll change the slides for him.
So Robert, what is that bullfrog eating? Is it another bullfrog?
Yeah, it's another frog. Yeah. I don't know whose photo that is, but it's the bullfrogs are voracious. We have there's a grad student, a former student, employee and student of mine and John's and Rulon's at San Diego State who's looking at bullfrog stomach contents from around San Diego County from some of the projects we've done with Sdmmp to remove bullfrogs. There's entire spadefoot toads in the bullfrogs. We've previously found entire arroyo toads. We've got multiple kinds of snakes, lots of small mammals. It's just the variety of food that they eat is shocking. So he's kind of integrating a lot of that data, and we've got pond turtles inside these bullfrogs. It's just they are very voracious, and we're trying to push them back from where they are in the county. The drought's helping us a little bit, which is good.
Well, while we have a minute, Jim, I'll show you the piece of artwork that is in my front yard. It's a monolith we made to surprise our kids on Christmas.
Is it stainless steel?
It's foam core, but it's about 6 foot high monolith. Our dog liked it too.
Yeah. Make your frozen. There you go. I don't see anything.
Oh. It's not there?
Well, I think they did a great job with the oh, we can't hear John, so he's back on. No, John, I can't hear you yet. Of course, IT problems.
I believe if it continues, he can call in and then he would have to coordinate speaking on the phone if it has to come to that.
There's a phone number, Kim?
Let me pull that up.
Yeah. So I think he can hear us. He just can't. He's not unlocked or something, maybe.
He should be unlocked
Do we
here.
need to promote him?
His
Nope.
microphone shows up as it's unmuted.
Right.
It's unmuted. Oh, okay, so then it might be a computer issue on his end then.
Yeah.
Robert, I'll send you the number in the chat.
How about now?
Oh, now we can hear it, John.
Oh,
Yes.
Now you can hear
Oh,
me.
yes, John.
Normally you can't silence John.
Ah, Oh, you
Welcome.
guys,
Happy to
I'm
have
so
you,
sorry.
John. Go ahead and start. Your first slide is up, so.
This is so annoying. I'm really, really sorry about this. But you can hear me fine now.
Yes, and we can see you for a sec there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm really sorry it's getting started off this way, but you should think of this this project we did as a first stab at prioritizing the control of invasive animals on conserved lands in San Diego County. And it was a huge effort. And the authors that you see listed here are those that contributed to a manuscript that describes the protocol and the overall results, but a bunch of other people contributed as well, and they're acknowledged in the paper. And at the end of the talk, I'll call out a few other people that were key to making it happen. And I do need to acknowledge that some very important and knowledgeable people were left out of the project. In some cases, I reached out to those people, but didn't get a timely response, or I just didn't get any response. Some committed early on, then had to bail out, or I just flat out overlooked them unintentionally. But trying to organize something that's of this magnitude that was meaningful with this many people meant that I just had to impose cutoffs, or didn't necessarily want to, but needed to in order to get something done. But the idea behind it is that it's a living document and you can be added and modified as the need arises, and then over time, more and more people will become aware of it and hopefully get drawn into it. So there's that one. The next slide, Robert. This is just to get your invasive species juices flowing here. This is the timing of the project back in 2019 coincided with an invasion of murder hornets in the state of Washington. They're apparently still intermittently finding nests as of late fall, but this made it in the popular media because these things are huge, and the name obviously evokes thoughts of some kind of serial killer hornet. Click it, Robert. There's also a boom of these Argentine black and white tegus in southeastern Georgia. This has nothing to do with California, obviously, yet, but these things get over 4 feet long and about 10 pounds. This guy just looks hungry. And if you go on iNaturalist for San Diego County, you can see a few observations of these things right here in, I believe Fallbrook was the most recent one. Next slide. And then maybe a week before the workshop in 2019, somebody contacted Chris Preston about an outbreak of Italian white snails in an open space area in North County. And you can, there you go. I don't know what the status of this situation is right now, but I do know that if snail invasions like this are detected early enough and at small scales, they can be contained fairly easily with spatulas and drywall trowels, apparently. I have no idea what these snails are doing to this tree here, but everything about it screams bad. Next one. The motivation for the project had to do with the fact that we live in an ecoregion with really high indigenous biodiversity, but at the same time, we have high numbers of species that are of conservation concern. And for most of them, it's really habitat loss and the presence of invasive predators and competitors that are the main reasons that they're imperiled. Click it, Robert. The second reason is that there's obviously a lot of urban sprawl and there's heavy transportation in and out of San Diego and Tijuana, which just means that things are easily brought in and out of the area. The modified landscape and the hydrology that comes along with urbanization intensifies the effects of the invaders that are already here because they're better able to exploit these novel environments than are the resident natives, which have no evolutionary context for novel disturbance. And then there's no time to dig into this concept of invasional meltdown, but it's essentially a threshold condition where successful invaders synergistically favor one another and promote the establishment of other invaders. And then the last reason for the motivation would be this, the Msp Roadmap, or M²SP Roadmap. I felt like we needed some more acronyms. So the roadmap calls for identification and prioritization of threats and stressors, and then sort of outlines the process for implementing monitoring and monitoring actions. But this crowd obviously knows what the roadmap is, so I don't need to explain this any further. You can click it, Robert. There are a lot of challenges to prioritizing non-native animal species for an entire county. The first thing is that it's hard when you're dealing with across these major taxonomic groups. So the groups aren't evolutionarily equivalent, they differ in ecology, they differ in life history, sensitivity to disturbance, all kinds of things. You're essentially dealing with apples and oranges. Next one. All kinds of protocols for prioritization exist, and it was really overwhelming at first, but none were seemingly one size fits all. And so the question was, which one do you choose? Do you develop your own? How do you go about doing this? Number 3, developing a meaningful scoring and weighting scheme can be really subjective, and it's rarely straightforward. And in many ways, I think that coming up with those sorts of schemes is a way to satisfy an obsession that we have in science, which is to constantly attach numbers, statistics, and math to everything we do, when in fact, common sense and expertise can do the job better in a lot of cases. Number 4, most of the protocols they're too narrowly focused to be useful across all animal groups, and they're often just focused on one specific geographic area. Number 5, most are limited to evaluations of threat, but they don't consider management feasibility. So the question is, if there's little or no chance of controlling something, is it worth the time and money and effort to go after it? Probably not. And then last, number 6, it's just hard to prioritize something if you don't know its status. If you don't know if it's established, what kind of damage is it causing, how widespread. And not knowing answers to those questions makes things really difficult. So next slide.
Now, there was one more comment about the globally unified risk.
Oh, there's one at the bottom there. I can't see it. Yeah, so there was all these different protocols, and there's sort of this push right now to try to unify efforts across the board, because a lot of the same species are affecting areas on a global scale. So it sort of makes sense to standardize things according to one common protocol. So we wanted to sort of work towards that as well. Okay. Let's see, the objectives. Sorry, the objectives had both applied and practical application. So the applied application was obviously number 1 here, and that was to prioritize invasive animal species with respect to risk and management. And then the second part, the practical application, involving testing the efficacy of this protocol, which at the time had much exposure outside of the original area in which it was developed. So we all agreed that working toward a unified approach was going to be worthwhile. And we wanted to make improvements to it so that it could be used more effectively elsewhere, and ultimately down the road in the future here, if we could. Next slide. These are the major taxonomic groups that we focus on, but as I said before, these aren't equivalent groups in a taxonomic or an evolutionary sense. And herps is probably the best example, and herps is, in addition to a weird sounding term, it's a vernacular term that refers to reptiles and amphibians and non-avian reptiles. And it's derived from Linnaeus's original classification of animals, but it's not a natural group. It's not a clade, but we kept it this way because herpetology is a field of study, and the assessors for that group happen to have strong expertise in both reptiles and amphibians. And so someone's probably asking, then why did you compare these groups if they're not these equivalent things? To which I'd say, we had to start somewhere. And we had to make forward progress on a problem that's not going away. And we have a living document that we can fine tune. So that would be my answer to that. We didn't address agricultural pests because the roadmap applies to conserved lands only. We didn't address any species that are already being actively managed at a county-wide or larger geographic scale, like Aedes mosquitoes. And then we didn't deal with marine or estuarine species. Next one. So the framework for performing the full analysis is just sort of distilled down into 4 steps here. We used a variety of literature and web-based sources to generate a list of non-native species and reference material to go along with them. Number 2, we assembled groups of assessors according to taxonomic expertise, and these included museum curators and associates, university professors, grad students, biological consultants, and employees of different state and federal agencies. The 3rd step was completing these risk assessment and management templates. They're questionnaires that I'll go over really quick in a second. Complete these templates for as many species as possible on the target list, focusing on those that are the greatest threats to conserved lands. And then number 4 is there was a 2-day event where we got everybody together and we did this consensus building workshop to arrive at final prioritization across the taxa. So next one. So risk categories, we focus on the first 4 and don't get bogged down in reading all of this. You can hit the arrow key, Robert. The first 2 represented different degrees of population establishment, and then there was a 3rd established category that reflected the unknown status of whatever species it was we were looking at. And then there were so-called horizon species, which are those that haven't been introduced but pose a reasonable or serious risk of getting here. And we have detailed descriptions of each of these categories in the paper, but it's just a bit much to get through in the talk right now. So next one. The templates, there were 2. So the first one was what we called a rapid risk assessment template, or RRA template. It was divided into these sections, and that kind of gives you a bit of a flavor of the types of questions and subject matter that were on that template. And then click number 2 is the risk management template, which just describes the management feasibility. So every single species that we treated has a completed RRA and RM template. Next. So the actual workshop kind of went something like this. So for each of the top 5 species in each taxonomic group, they had a risk assessment subrank and a risk management subrank. And then those 2 ranks went into ranking a species within each taxonomic group. And so for the first day, the groups basically worked together. They ranked their species within their respective taxonomic groups. And then at the end of day 1, all the there was a designated group leader for each group. And then the group leader gave an oral presentation justifying how they ranked the species with their group. And then arrow key. And then, so once those oral presentations were complete, sorry, this got everybody sort of on the same page so we could all see exactly how things were being ranked. We had a discrete set of criteria for doing this, but it was good to just have everybody see how everybody else was doing things so that we were all on the same page. And we got into some really interesting discussions, and it helped us also to resolve some underlying issues that the protocol had in its original form. And one in particular was the issue of control versus eradication. So the original protocol had eradication as the ultimate management goal, which it should be, but for most invasive species in San Diego County, eradication is just out of control. But that being said, some level of control would offer significant benefits for native species and habitat than if we were to just let them run wild. So end of day 1, we had our ranks within the taxonomic group. Day 2 started, we refined and modified things by group. And at the end of day 2, we all got together and then we prioritized across groups. So next slide. General results, we came up with 51 priority listed species, 29 of which occur on NCCP lands, and 22 were classified as horizons. Next one. The greatest number of established high-risk taxa, so these have to be established and reproducing and are high risk. Arthropods and fish tied for first, and then next click. The established species with the highest potential for management were herps and mammals, or not surprisingly. And then click. And then just some more general results. The primary driver of the top 5 rankings in each group was management feasibility. And we know this because the standard deviations of the risk management subrank scores were considerably more variable than the risk assessment subranks. And because I made a dig at statistics earlier, I went ahead and included some here. So we did these Polycore correlation tests and showed that there was no significant relationship between the risk of a species and its management feasibility, which indicated that the 2 metrics were informing the analysis in different ways. And then advance it, Robert. And then another interesting general result is that horizon species that were identified as high risk but with low management potential, in other words, the things that might be the most concerning and unwanted type of horizon species, those were assigned only moderate priority. And that was simply because they had low management potential. So we don't want to go dumping a bunch of effort into something if there's not going to be return for managing it. And then you click, Robert. And then last, we also found that the consensus building approach had a strong influence on how the species were ranked within groups, because at the time of the first oral presentation by group leaders on day 1 to the end of the second day, after multiple breakout sessions combined with deliberations, we were all able to arrive at our final prioritization. So it was an incremental refinement of the way things worked as the workshop proceeded. Next one. So now I'll just give you some examples of the highest priority established species with, many of those are tied to aquatic environments. And remember that they're high priority not only because they're major threats, but because they can be managed to a degree that would benefit native biota with either high or with either high or very high confidence. So these 3 American bullfrog species of bass of the genus Micropterus, there's 3 different species that are a problem, and then red swamp crayfish all have their greatest impacts on native species in the early life history stages. So eggs, larvae, and juvenile native species are the most vulnerable to predation by these guys. And then adult native species have to deal with both competition and predation. Bullfrogs get big, bass get big, and the bigger they grow, the larger the prey they can take. And it's important to note that each of these that you see here thrive in hydrologically modified conditions. So they prefer low stream energy, deeper pooled habitat, warmer water temperatures. These would be lentic conditions in the limnology terms. And that all contrasts with the natural hydrology of the region, where aquatic habitat is naturally ephemeral, streams have intermittent flow, and conditions are more lotic, they're more riverine than they are lentic. Then we also have this extreme seasonal variation in precipitation, which creates flashy high volume flows in the winter or in early spring, and then we have months to even years of drought. So native species are adapted to those conditions. They can deal with them. Instability is their shtick, whereas these non-natives, they can't tolerate those same conditions. Instead, they rely on modified hydrologic regimes, so lakes, reservoirs, golf course, ponds. Those sorts of things are sources, and then they spill over into streams. And click, Robert. The fire ant was an interesting one because it pops up intermittently, and we couldn't say with 100% certainty that there were no colonies that are currently present. But because of their high potential to become invasive, as they have in other areas, we treated them as established. And they're particularly bad because they reduce biodiversity in areas where they establish. Not to the pig yet. They've got these massive multi-queen super colonies. They readily spread in nursery stock and sod and beehives. And then, of course, they have these human and livestock health issues that are associated with the stings. Boar, pig's turn now. There you go. It's another interesting one. They are considered to be in very low numbers at the time of the workshop, but the status was uncertain. There was a coordinated eradication effort that began in 2014 in San Diego County, and as of 2016, the population was estimated to be about 20 or fewer pigs, according to Megan Jennings. At the time of the workshop, they weren't being actively managed, so we included in the assessment, but countywide management has since started to kick in again, according to Megan. And this species is bad. It's bad. They're horribly destructive. They're elusive. They multiply rapidly. And because they're a constant threat, because they're livestock, as livestock, they can escape. And then individuals have also been intermittently introduced deliberately for hunting. The next one, the final one, last but not least, if there was a #1 priority invader, we all agreed it was beaver. And yes, beaver is non-native to this ecoregion. There is zero sound evidence that it was ever native here. And the transplanting of beaver to this part of the state by CDFW and the Forest Service in the late 40s and 50s is well documented. People will try to convince you that they aren't native. They're not native. And the main issue is that beaver create preferred lentic habitat for these aquatic invaders at the top here. So no point in managing for bullfrog or bass or crayfish if there's a non-native ecosystem engineer at the top of the trophic structure that's just chewing its way to creating habitat that supports and favors these invaders. They're also bad for native stands of cottonwood and willow, and once those trees come down, it paves the way for invasion by non-native plants like tamarisk. Beaver are easily detectable and certainly could be managed with a focused effort, and doing that would likely have significant impacts on these other aquatic invasives. You wouldn't necessarily be getting rid of them, but you might in some areas. At least you'd be lessening the pressure to a point where natives might be able to generate greater biotic resistance and not have to worry about dying in a bullfrog's stomach. Almost done. Next slide. For horizon species, red fox was deemed to be a high priority horizon because of records near Seal Beach, National Wildlife Refuge in Orange County, and from other coastal preserves up in Orange County. Assessors agreed that its incremental dispersal along the coast into San Diego is possible, and it's a threat to ground nesting birds, reptiles, and small mammals. It would likely enter San Diego County through Camp Pendleton. So things like least tern, snowy plover, California gnatcatcher, Stevens kangaroo rat, Pacific pocket mouse would all be at risk if this were to get there. Next one. Birds were not that big of an issue because introduced birds are mainly limited to areas where there's the subtropical flowering and fruiting plants provide a year-round food supply, and those all exist in the urban matrix. So apart from a few species, non-native birds were generally viewed as having little effect on NCCP lands. But this one is the Nandi Parakeet. It's a cavity nester, survives in native woodlands in LA and Ventura counties to the north, and there was concern that it could displace other native cavity nester species down here, particularly the nestling and the young. So things like kestrels and screech owls and woodpeckers. Click snore and whiptail, and click one more time. The quagga mussel have recently come online since the workshop. So the whiptails have showed up in Oceanside, and quagga mussel was recently reported from the San Luis Rey River. So both of these are concerning for reasons I don't have time to get into, but most of you are probably familiar with the damage that invasive quagga and zebra mussels are capable of. Click. These are some special cases. These are what we called spillover species from urban established areas. So these are things that are mostly found in the urban areas right now, but we discuss them in terms of their competency to actually get onto and do damage on NCCP lands. And one with high competency was thought to be the eastern fox squirrel, because it has this potential to exploit corridor riparian habitat out of the urban areas. And it also contributes to population declines of the native gray squirrel in parts of LA and Orange County. And so we're concerned that that might happen here if it gets into corridors that take it up into the more inland parts of the county. And that contrasts with things like domestic cat and house mouse there, where they're bad in urban areas and they suck and we all dislike them, but they have much lower competency in the larger and more interior parts of conserved lands because of predation. And then they tend to cling to urban areas because of the resource subsidies that they get in those areas. And then 18, next steps. This is the last slide. And so management obviously on the highest priority species. For quagga mussel, it's really important to get a handle on this recent detection of the San Luis Rey because they can explode so quickly. And then managing beaver is such an obvious and logical decision that would likely have huge impacts on knocking back some of the most insidious non-native aquatic predators, particularly in the Santa Margarita. So without going after beaver, trying to manage invasive predators amounts to little more than, it's basically you're a hamster on a spinning wheel. Click. There's got to be a way to make all of this accessible and easy to modify and update. And Emily just threw herself into the lion's den because she's clearly the most qualified to do this. But this is the only way I can see kind of keeping this updated and making it accessible to everybody. So some sort of web interface. Click. Continue hosting and monitoring the San Diego Invasive Species Watch web portal on iNaturalist. And so anyone can go on there and you can look at where non-native species have been recorded in the county. It's a really effective tool. And then last, if we can start emphasizing the problems with invasive species and educate kids from a young age, we stand a much better chance of ameliorating the negative impacts of biodiversity in this ecoregion. So I think that's also a very important one. And then last one is I want to thank the three people on the top left are all USGS people. Brittany, Wendy, and Jenny, they were hugely instrumental and carried a lot of the weight in helping me get a lot of this stuff done, particularly with the templates. And then Chris and Yvonne were really instrumental leaders in seeing this process through and supporting me and encouraging me. And then Sarah was really awesome and helpful in keeping it all organized. And maybe she's maybe a little bit underappreciated, but after I went through this experience with her, I really was blown away by how much she contributed to the study. So thanks. That's it.
Thanks, John. Hey, do we have
Sure.
Comments or questions? Jim.
Hi, thanks. That was very good presentation. I almost said performance because presentation is a better word. First thing, I do have to criticize you when you use urban sprawl. There hasn't been any development of any size in the last 10 years. So this is what's already here. But I have a question for you is, how do you deal with the general public's revulsion towards control of what are cute and squishy and fun things that look like they're okay?
Yeah, so that's kind of worked into these templates in the management feasibility. And it's a big issue, and it's you have to take that consideration. They just have to be a part of it. And I think a lot of that, once they're educated about the problems that say beaver are causing, and they understand that they're not native and that they were deliberately introduced here, hopefully they'll think differently. But it definitely, the general public needs to be considered in this process.
I mean, you got Bucky Beaver, Porky Pig,
Totally.
Sammy the Crow.
Yeah. No, we definitely considered it in the prioritization process.
The alternative to beaver is having steelhead back. Like that's literally the inverse, of the beaver problem is the steelhead. And that's, I think, what we need to really sell is those benefits.
Yeah, I think we'll all need to kind of team together and figure out the best way to approach that. But it's a good point, Jim.
And this is Chris. I think it's really important we address this beaver issue because it affects a lot of our listed species, arroyo toad, least Bell's vireo. And, we're spending so much money trying to monitor and manage them. And then to have this, just one pair of beavers can do an incredible amount of damage to the habitat for these listed species. So it's really we address it.
So Chris is a co-author on a paper that's kind of outlined the issues surrounding beaver and the damage that they cause. And so the goal is to get that out there as quickly as possible, just so people can become educated about it.
Any other questions or comments?
Susan saw the whiptails for the, she had her first experience with those last week, so she could speak to that, I think.
Yeah, Robert and I had a hot date to the Walmart.
I can remember it was Walmart or Target.
It was Walmart.
Nothing like walking around the backside of Walmarts and putting out sticky traps. We blended right in.
Yeah. You couldn't even tell what we put down versus the garbage that was already there everywhere.
But I mean, literally within minutes we had caught some, and the number of them was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And so educating everybody about what they look like so that when we're all out and about and can, get that maybe earlier detection, especially because the females can just lay eggs with no males, and I don't know how you control a species like that.
Yeah.
It's parthenogenic, Jim. You can see you shaking your head. No males, yeah. It's the first credible threat to orange-throated whiptails since that's kind of come up with all the land use planning. We've shown small patches can still contain orange-throated whiptails. We've shown that Argentine ants aren't that bad for orange-throated whiptails. This is the first credible threat to the NCCP kind of concept of having gnatcatchers, cactus wrens, and orange-throated whiptails as those 3 target species. And there's about 85 square kilometers of whiptails now in Orange County of these invasives, and about 4 kilometers in San Diego County and Oceanside area. So it's really, and this has just happened since John's meeting and workshop. That's how fast this early detection rapid response needs to be to deal with these credible threats.
Okay, anyone else? Do we have any members of the public?
I was just gonna add that I know that the Italian white snail was kind of new on our list when the workshop happened, but we definitely need to keep that one in mind. I've still been seeing it out. I found it out when we were doing surveys for Otay tar plant, literally right next to the tar plant, eating some other plant species. I don't know if it preferably chose the other plant or if it was just coincidence it was on the other plant, but definitely a threat to our rare plant species. So you need to keep that one in mind.
Carry a spatula.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
Is that the
Or
snail that's all
flamethrower.
over, Otay that you see crawling up all the signs?
Probably, I'm sure it is. It's not the milky one, it's the smaller one. And yeah, like John said, the old method was a blowtorch. So I don't think we can do that anymore. But yeah, it'll estivate in like giant clumps and mass together.
Yeah, I mean, because those have been on Otay for quite a while, but in certain times of year, like they'll be covering a stop sign or the K rail or.
See down here in San Diego, there's a column.
Okay. And do we have any members of the public that have any comments? Can you see those, Kim? I don't see any.
I don't think we do. No.
Okay, well, thanks again, John. Do we have the link to John's study? Not just John's study, but the study.
Definitely not.
We can we'll provide all that. You guys will be getting a big email with a lot of links and or papers and all that fun stuff. So
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being patient with me. This is always fun virtually. Our next meeting is, let's see, when is that?
I think it's September 8th. I have June on there, but it's September 8th.
Yeah.
That was 14th.
Meeting is in
14th, excuse me.
September 14th.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim. It is 2:54. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Go out and have a great day, rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.